back. All right, we're going to do window, share this one, click share. Cool. So everybody, thank you for joining us. I am your host, Keith Hoodlet. Today, we are going to be speaking with Jamie Finnegan about insights from HashiCorp on how they secure the software that they ship. It's some really cool software, honestly. I'm sure many of you know it, and if you don't, you'll get to learn a little bit about it today. Of course, as always, I am your host for this particular session. It'd be weird if I wasn't. So if you do want to engage with us, though, there is the chat available. So please go ahead and engage with us there. We're happy to answer questions. Or of course, if you have any sort of commentary as well, we'd love to hear it. And then you can certainly request a demo of some of the things that we're going to discuss today. So just that's available, use it, and we'd love to hear from you. With that, I am joined today by Jamie Finnegan, who is the Director of Product Security at HashiCorp. HashiCorp, I know them for some of the work that they do on secrets management with Vault, as well as several other tools such as Terraform that are very popular, but there are many more worth discussing. And so, Jamie, welcome to InFocus with GitHub. Really glad to have you here.
Keith, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jamie, for the audience, I mean, you and I have had a chance to get to know each other over the last couple of years as being members of the Customer Advisory Board before I joined GitHub. So tell us, though, for the rest of the audience listening today, how'd you get started in security? How'd you end up at HashiCorp? And what does a Director of Product Security do at HashiCorp?
Oh, well, origin stories are always interesting. Like, I won't get into my teenage years growing up in New Zealand and the things security related that we got up to there. But my security industry entry was an interesting one. This was, I was working as a Unix, a BSD sysadmin, in a relatively boring job, and I was reading the newspaper at lunchtime one day. You know, those things they used to print and would like sitting around a break room at the offices we used to go to.
Right. Exactly. You'd sit in the waiting room, and they'd be like sort of stashed there, and you'd like pick it up and get ink all over your fingers before you'd go in for a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was sitting there reading a newspaper, looking at the job listings, and I saw a posting from Deloitte saying, "Hey, we're looking for people who want to be like early stage security consultants." And I'm like, well, I don't know much about security, but you know, I'll give it a go. So I wrote them an actual letter, sent it in, and I was actually looking at this in my the other day. I still have the physical copy of the clipped out newspaper ad and the letter I sent them, which was my job application. And I ended up joining as a security consultant to do kind of AppSec and network pen test type engagement. So that was my entry from Deloitte. Deloitte was actually the employer that took me from Wellington, New Zealand to the Bay Area, where I spent a couple of years or a year, and then moved up to Seattle, and I've been in kind of working in security here ever since, across a range of consulting roles, working with a wide variety of companies, as well as more recently industry roles, doing a kind of some startup and some bigger enterprise gigs. A couple of standouts would be I spent some time at Zynga, kind of protecting people's Farmville cache. That was a fun
that was important to me several years ago, so I appreciate that.
I spent some time at HP working on OpenStack. So that was a very kind of open source centric role. One of the things we did there was actually, if anybody's used Python's Bandit code scanner, that began its life as a single Python script on my laptop. Which very rapidly got several other people involved and has ended up being a project that lives on to this day. So that's kind of a cool time to look back on. More recently, I spent some time at a local Seattle startup, protecting kind of an AWS deployed SaaS product, essentially. And then the last 3 years I've spent at HashiCorp, where I'm Director of Product Security.
So what does it mean, Director of Product Security? So first of all, what are the products and what do they do? And sort of tell us about especially your experience there, right? Because most people know HashiCorp from some of the work that they did in the open source space, and of course now they're a publicly listed global technology company. So tell me a little bit about that as well. But let's start with like, where did you start when in terms of being Director of Product Security? Did you start as director, and did you have a team when you joined, or was that like a thing that you built? Yeah,
this is kind of an interesting thing about security careers, I guess, is you, at least an interesting thing about my security career is that this is I believe the first role I've taken where I've stepped straight into a management role.
Okay.
Previously, I've always joined a company as an IC, worked into a management role, and then gone back to an IC role elsewhere. So this one I joined 3 years ago as with director in my title. At the time, it was me and Talha, our CSO. I was his first hire. So it was
Very cool.
Talha and myself trying to kind of wrap our heads around what needed to be done. Since that time, the security organization has grown significantly. I've got a team of engineers working for me now doing product security things. And the security organization here, it looks like you're kind of fairly typical modern security company. We have a kind of security engineering team that looks after our operational footprint, threat detection and response, that does cloud security work as well, kind of managing risk around our operating footprint, essentially. We have a GRC compliance team, we have a red team, we have a corporate security team. So yeah, we do all the security things for the company, but product security in particular, we are focused. The way I kind of tell the story is we basically look at the design of our products and then the code bases associated with those products, the various dependencies associated with those code bases, and the supply chain that is used to build and deploy those products. And then, from there, there's work to be done. So that's essentially our scope. That's our role. It's generally a fairly technical role, but I personally spend quite a lot of time in Zoom and in Google Docs, as do a lot of people these days. So yeah, that's pretty much me.
Nice. That's great background. Go ahead.
Yeah, we met on a customer advisory board for GitHub. So I think you've recently switched roles and have now landed there. Tell me a bit about how that happened, perhaps.
Yeah. So it's kind of you to remember. So at the time I was at Thermo Fisher Scientific building the DevSecOps program there, which I know that we're going to have some words about here in a moment. But to say, built the program there from the ground up in sort of a similar way, I think, to what you are doing and continue to do at HashiCorp. But for me, just in, I don't know, around November, I guess, November 2nd of last year is when I joined GitHub. But I think what sort of started that journey for me was ultimately having worked in the binary static analysis industry and the static analysis industry at large at other security companies, and then building a security program. When I brought GitHub and code scanning and some of their tool sets for static analysis into Thermo Fisher, I got really excited about the technology. And for like 2-ish years, I was just trying to find any opportunity that made the most sense where I could play with CodeQL and write some interesting queries and help customers understand, static analysis and how that differentiates from other forms of tools that are out there over the last 2 decades. So that's what got me interested. I would say it's sort of serendipitous, that right role, right opportunity, right time. After having been at Thermo Fisher for over 3 years myself and building that program, it sort of felt like the right move. And, sort of like your past career history, I was in leadership and then, IC leadership back into IC roles. So it is sort of takes you 3 to 5 months to sort of be like, can I really do this? And then you're like, oh yeah, I can still do this. So I'm starting to get to that point now. But you mentioned a moment ago, or I mentioned a moment ago around DevSecOps, and I know that you've written an interesting blog post back in 2018. I think we're of the same mind, but I find it funny that DevSecOps seems to be the sort of latest brand of security, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, both from your 2018 blog post, as well as if that has changed at all as you've been leading the team there at HashiCorp now for 3 years.
Yeah, 2018. I think I actually went back and read that blog post again last night just because I needed to refresh myself on what I was saying. But looking back, I think both you and I perhaps had similar thoughts that were expressed at that time, which was DevSecOps. The way I wrote about it was it felt like a almost another example of securities need to be named, is what I was referring to here, where you see kind of technology moving forward, you see new concepts, new ideas being developed, and then you see security trying hard to keep up and bringing security to the party for what it were, and adding security to the label or to the name. So that was kind of the target of my blog post there. I think it was interesting looking back at that time. DevSecOps was kind of perhaps at like what do they call it on the hype cycle? I think the peak of inflated expectations is what they refer to there.
Sure.
And you look back there, and there was a lot of noise and a lot of kind of content and a lot of ideas or promises being discussed. It's as I thought about that last night and kind of the context for writing about DevSecOps in the way I did back then. It's encouraging to see just how much progress has been able to be made, and how the DevOps in general has been able to continue to progress, how these security contributions to the kind of mode of working, mode of operating have improved, and how the tooling available, the solutions available have improved. So I think overall, I feel more positive about the term than I used to, shall we say.
That's a good.
How about yourself?
A good reflection. It's funny, when I used to run the Application Security Weekly podcast back in 2018, I think one of the early episodes, I said more or less the same thing that I think you said in your blog, which is DevSecOps doesn't exist. It's literally it's part of part 6 of the DevOps handbook, right? It's right in here. It's branded as part of DevOps. We should be thinking about it as part of the DevOps cycle, and yet there was a lot of sort of hype around the term DevSecOps. And to your point, in 2018, later that year, when I became a manager of application security, and then my branding and titling changed to DevSecOps because of the product security focus, I sort of said, okay, well, now I need to embrace it in some respects because it's now in my title for the job that I have, but I need to figure out what DevSecOps should be. And to the point that you made, I feel like over these last few years, we've really seen that shift of tools that really do engender a DevSecOps mindset, that sort of fast flow, rapid feedback, continuous learning, DevOps cycle, but inclusive of security and sort of constantly present as part of that without needing to think about it. It's the analogy I like to use is, finally, it feels like security is a feature of the development lifecycle. And so that's sort of the change that I think has happened. And I'm more comfortable with it now than I was back then. I was perhaps a bit salty about it, but it's grown in the industry, it become accepted, and I think it's actually being embraced in a lot of ways. Now, I actually want to turn sort of to the next topic, which is all the different solutions that HashiCorp provides that I think plug into what I would consider the DevSecOps process in a number of different ways. I'm most familiar with the secrets management platform Vault, and also Vagrant and Terraform, but there are a lot of other products that you're responsible for securing. What are they? What do they do? And then we can dive into some of the security elements associated with them.
Yeah. Let me put my marketing hat on for a moment and kind of take a top-down approach. So kind of at a high level, HashiCorp, like one of the taglines we use is infrastructure enables innovation. So that's kind of the company mission in many ways. If I drill down one level in our marketing content, we have this thing we call the cloud operating model, which is kind of the abstract representation of how we talk about our products. And what we lay out there is kind of a provision, secure, connect, and run order of operation that we provide solutions in each of those categories for. Now, if I go further to our individual products, the two kind of most well-known perhaps are probably at this point Vault, which we use for secret management. It also provides encryption as a service and various other kind of security related features. We also, Terraform is our infrastructure as code solution for managing cloud and other IT environments in a standard workflow. We have Consul, which is a kind of cloud or service networking solution. It does service discovery, service mesh, other kind of networking connectivity. So that's the connect piece of the puzzle. We have Nomad on the run side. That's like a workload orchestration, essentially, is what that does. Kubernetes Lite might be one way to think about it.
I was just going to ask, is it anything like Kubernetes, but perhaps and hopefully easier to use?
We like to think it is easier to use. There's that. The the system diagram has a few less boxes as well. So
good. Okay.
Sometimes a good
I'm
thing when you're trying to reason about security, right?
Sure. Yeah, fewer boxes to go insecure is definitely, or at least make sure that the sort of edges of those things are secure in the ways that you want them to be is easier for
Exactly.
sure.
Yes. Others on the list, so there's Boundary, which is a relatively new solution for managing remote access to just IT environments in general. Waypoint is a developer deployment abstraction layer that currently sits above a Kubernetes cluster or above Amazon's ECS for deploying deploying into environments from developer workstations and the like. And then if I want to go old school, of course, there's still Vagrant and Packer, which Packer in particular is used by so many companies across the globe for building machine images in many different ways. So yeah, it's an interesting range of products. Like when I had the opportunity to join, HashiCorp was already a well-established brand, and they're the kinds of products that we bring a practitioner-first approach. So again, if I step back a little, we start with open source generally. We may have an enterprise or an on-prem version of that open source project. And then we also are currently building out our cloud service offering. So I guess that's part of the journey too there.
What is the journey of securing that like, though? I mean, securing an open source project where you have a lot of possible exposure there versus then moving into sort of the on-premise and also then in the cloud customer like paid for products. How does that differentiate? What is that like from, I mean, you've seen it from the beginning with the product security team. What was that like, and what are you continuing to drive toward, right? Like, what is sort of the ideal world that you'd like to live in when it comes to achieving that at scale?
Yeah. Side note here, one of my pet peeves about listening to podcasts is when people say, "That's a great question," as filler while they think about what they're going to say. So
Sure.
that's a great question, Keith. Like seriously, open source is an interesting place to start. Obviously, like one of the things you talk about when you talk about security is just how much information are you going to disclose about the thing you're securing, right? Information disclosure is a real thing. It exposes more of your footprint and gives attackers kind of a place to learn and figure out how they might target you. So by default, when you are open source, there are pros and cons of that from a security perspective. The cons, I mean, our code bases are out there in public for anybody to look at and find security flaws in, and the pros, our code is out there in public for anybody to look at and find security flaws in, right? It's kind of the same thing, has a positive and negative and possibly negative effect for us. We view it largely, I mean, it's positive for us. We love the fact that we have a community out there. We love the fact that our customers can download and scan the core of the products that they're using and let us know if they are concerned or ask questions about issues they're seeing. So yeah, open source is a huge part of what we do. The journey from open source and then on-prem software to cloud services is an interesting one because of the change in security model and the way we have to think about that. So we go from being a provider of software where we focus on securing that software and securing the pipeline we use to produce it, to being a provider of services, and customers are trusting us with their data. So we need to put appropriate security investment to protect that data because that's a core part of the service we offer. So yeah, it's I guess an expansion of security thinking, expansion of security model, expansion of the challenges that we are facing on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, all good things.
And so when it comes to sort of the organizational elements associated with that, tell us about your journey about building the product security program at HashiCorp, right? So you've got these challenges, you're sort of growing with the company as the company is becoming commercialized. What was that like? Talk me through, the building the team, the sort of things that you focused on, process, tooling we can certainly talk about here in a moment, but I'm curious to know the people on the process side first, because I think that's really important as part of the setup.
Absolutely. So yeah, I was the kind of first ProdSec oriented team member. The couple of things, I guess. So when we joined, there was already significant velocity. So there was catch-up work to be done. Couple of just kind of key tenets: kind of start small, extinguish fires, get quick wins. Some of the kind of rules of thumb that we lived by at first there. Always be learning, really, is the start. So you don't just join and then start enforcing security mandates. You join and you learn. Like, you listen, you learn, you figure out, what is this place that I've joined? What is this suite of products that I'm now responsible for? What are the risks associated with them? And then you start figuring out, okay, what does the roadmap look like? Where is it that we want to? How do we design our program? What are our priorities? What are the key things we need to go get done to reduce risk and support the business and being successful here? So that's kind of the basic line of thinking. For us, we, like I said, we're basically an infrastructure company in many ways, and those are an interesting kind of product in that we're not just building, like, OS top 10 is a good list of security risks to think about, but we think about much more than just that when we're looking at infrastructure products that are being deployed in a wide variety of ways in a wide variety of environments. And I needed to find people who were willing to jump into that challenging space and bring a range of skill sets that wasn't just, hey, you're sitting in front of this web browser kind of login page to a web app, see what you can break about it. But yeah, the scope goes much more broad than just that.
I can imagine it was hard to find that sort of talent. Did you have to do a lot of training as well of like talent that specialized in one area but help make them more broad? Because I could see that being a real, you're looking for a level of talent that there's a very small pool of people and a very large amount of competition to bring those people into an organization.
Yeah, it is difficult. We've actually had I would say, some very good luck in terms of finding people who are able to jump in and contribute from an early stage. I think one of the benefits of being open source is that our products are already out there and are accessible to practitioners everywhere. So that often when I'm hiring, I'm looking for people who have at least tried using some of our open source projects and maybe had a look at the code, or maybe submitted a PR to fix something or to improve something. So that's always a nice starting point as when we're looking for people who know our products.
Yeah, I can imagine the recruiting from open source world made that easy, right? Because you could then start to identify who is it that is already contributing to our code base, that already understands how the product works, that feels passionate about making this product work well. Especially if you find security fixes that are coming in, like you immediately have identified people that you should go and reach out to, and you know that their onboarding is going to be a lot easier as a result.
That does help. Yep. That's worked some. It's not always easy too, though. So we have brought in folks just with good kind of modern security experience, cloud security experience, Golang experience, and they are all kind of jumping in and contributing and kind of building up the program for us, which is great.
Good. And so I wanted to move on to another question around, what does a product security program look like at scale, right? So you talked a lot about being there, starting, focusing on making sure you're learning things, starting small and getting quick wins. But what does achieving product security at scale look like at HashiCorp?
Yeah, so maybe I can talk briefly first of all about what our team, the way we've structured our team for a start. So we're kind of taking a matrix approach at the moment, where individuals in the product security team will most likely, most of us have a product specific focus. So an individual will work specifically on Terraform, or specifically on Vault, or specifically on the cloud platform that we're building. So there's that product depth. And then individuals will also have program level focuses where there's more the breadth across the portfolio. So one or two people might be working on how we do threat modeling across all of the products. Another few might be working on how we do security scanning, or some kind of GitHub Advanced Security product adoption, how we're deploying that across the portfolio. Another example is vulnerability response. So we have that product specific depth as well as the program breadth that we're working at.
So is it sort of like, as they say, like the T, F, and E-shaped people? It's like you sort of start at the T where they go really deep on something and maybe have that broad level, but you're trying to get them toward that F or that E where it's like, okay, they have a product level knowledge of security that's really important at that deep level. They have some higher level program level responsibilities that might cover more than one product. And then it sounds like they have that sort of broader visibility at the top layer of understanding how the pieces fit together and who to work with and collaborate with to get the things that their product needs if it's outside of their focus.
Yep, exactly. The more time you spend here, the more kind of you probably are going to learn about another product, and you're probably going to learn about another program level component. So you may start as an I, or you may start as a, there's these shapes, you kind of just slowly expand into this all-encompassing tree, right?
Yeah. So I also got to ask, we had a question in the Q&A that I wanted to sort of go to quickly as well, because there was a question around how would people compare Vault to GitHub Secrets? And I think that what people mean is GitHub Secrets in terms of probably like our secret scanning. So I know that there is, of course, the encrypted secrets that we have, but Vault is different. Tell for our audience, let's make sure we distinguish those two.
Yeah. Maybe for that I can talk about another HashiCorp tenant we have, or it's called the Tao of HashiCorp, which is workflows, not technology, is kind of one of the core things that we talk about as we've designed and developed our product. One of the core ideas behind each one of our products is we want to be technology agnostic to the point that we can. We want to be provider, we want to be multi-cloud, right? We want to be essentially provider agnostic. We want to support multiple cloud providers. We want to support your on-prem platform. And what we want to do is bring a common shared workflow to you that your employees, your developers, your systems can use regardless of the technology that is sitting behind it or that is sitting in front of it. So what Vault does is it provides you with that common secret storage solution. It has a standard set of APIs, it has a standard set of standard UI, and then the workflow for adding secrets, for accessing secrets, for removing secrets, for auditing access to those secrets is the same regardless of the type of secret or the various technologies that those secrets are associated with. So that's kind of I guess the intent behind Vault. I think GitHub Secrets in this case are probably talking about the secrets you populate to the within like a GitHub Actions workflow. And that is a different kind of workflow, right? So you're thinking about workflows at different levels. I would say GitHub Secrets, it makes sense to use them if that's the workflow that you're focused on, and that's the that's how the level of abstraction that you want to present. Alternatively, you can use Vault from within GitHub Actions. That may be one approach you take, and that may, because of the workflow that supports and exposes more broadly across your environment, that may be a viable solution or a solution that you want to take on. So yeah, I think these technologies both have their uses depending on what workflow you want to be able to utilize.
In a lot of ways, I sort of differentiate them similar to the way that you're thinking of it, which I always treat Vault as if you are pulling in forms of credentials that need to be variabilized and placed in your code, it makes sense to use a secrets management platform to do that. If you are calling to a service that your application relies on, having that secret in Vault is a great way to make sure that you can sort of manage and maintain it somewhat easily and rotate it as you need to. But secrets in that case as well are also useful if maybe you don't have or want that overhead, or you don't necessarily want to be dependent on a third-party system. You sort of want to provide it in a safe way to the code base, but you know that that lives where the developers are working directly, and they sort of have that access to it in a way that's a little different. So to your point, I think that they both, they live in the same space somewhat, but they play well with one another. And so it's to the point that you've made. It's really depending on the workflow you're trying to accomplish and the way that your application is sort of architected and intended to function. So great question from the audience. So I want to keep moving.
Something there which is great. Just the rotation concept that Vault supports is useful. Like if I step back from Vault particularly, ephemeral secrets are a huge part of today's security environment. Like, you see the impact of passwords, tokens, etc., being leaked. And when those are long-lived things that don't expire or have very long lifetimes, the blast radius is so much more significant than if it's a secret, an API token that was only valid for the 5-minute or the 1-hour window that it was requested for, right? There's technologies and workflows that support that general idea of ephemeral access, kind of time-bound access, are super useful in today's security world.
Absolutely. So, talking about tools, tell me a little bit about, what sort of tools are you bringing into the environment at HashiCorp? Because of course, there's a lot of things that are available open source. There's a lot of things that are available commercially. How do you think about that problem? And what is your sort of approach to addressing that at HashiCorp when you think about, of course, bringing in a new tool can mean that somebody has to learn how to use it and care and feed for it. But what is your thought process around all of that?
Yeah. So build versus buy is a fairly constant debate for us. Obviously, buying a solution that just works and does what you want it to be has its draw cards for sure. Pardon me. We are I would like to say we're a relatively engineering-centric, engineering-driven company, and building, of course, is always something that we are interested in doing because it allows us to explore a problem space ourselves and do something custom that we enjoy using. So yeah, there's always that build versus buy trade-off. When it comes to security tooling in general, my lens on this is mostly around essentially security scanning solutions is probably the thing I think about most here. So vulnerability scanning, static analysis tooling, dynamic analysis testing, even like cloud security tools for managing cloud security footprints. It's a lot of it comes down to basically building up some kind of inventory, be it a collection of cloud assets, a collection of code repositories, and then maintaining a level of coverage and security visibility over those assets. For us, I've kind of, I guess this is my experience speaking, but I've lived through the stage where static analysis tools were out there that you would fire off at a code base. It would run for a long time, and it would give you back a long laundry list of issues that may or may not be actual security exposures. But that, yes, I mean, false positives are the bane of any security person's existence, I think, if you've lived through that. So yeah, when it comes to buying tools and building tools, like low false positive rate is an absolutely huge deciding point for us. The other big deciding point for us is the user experience or the developer experience. I mentioned earlier the whole idea of workflows, not technologies, right? And for us, the workflow is how does the user interface with the system, and is it a pleasant experience or not? Like that is that is a big part of this. From a security perspective, if you want people to use your security tool, you need to make sure that the experience that they have as they do it is not a bad one, right? You want to make this thing. Yeah, we want to buy tools that are usable and that are not something that you dread opening the browser window to and having to deal with on a daily basis.
And that's a really good point. And so, of course, part of the reason we invited you here is you're using some of GitHub's products to think about the ways in which you secure HashiCorp. Basically, what I want to ask is, when you're bringing those tools in, how do you sort of take the data that's being produced and enrich your product security program, both from the sort of the results that you're getting from the things that we're providing to you, but also to inform you of the broader spectrum of sort of vulnerabilities and the landscape and risk exposure that you might have in some of the products that you're offering to your customers?
Yeah. So maybe I can talk briefly to how we view GitHub in general at the moment, because I think that kind of informs my answer to this question. So GitHub is essentially where our source code lives. Like we have a large number of public and private repositories in our various GitHub organizations. So GitHub itself gets heavy use on a day-to-day basis by our entire engineering organization and other teams across the company. We use GitHub Actions as well for a kind of the kind of common CI use case, as well as a range of other kind of automation pieces. It's a nice place to land recurring tasks, scheduled tasks, ad hoc things that we need to get done. And from a product security perspective, we look at GitHub and we say, okay, that's where our engineers live. Our current mode of thinking is, let's take our security content there rather than trying to extract our engineers out to some other security tool or some other security context. So folks are probably aware, you go to a GitHub repository. At the top of that repository is a security tab. The tab has a number of different kind of subviews within it, but our current line of thinking is we want to be taking the data that we gather from various disparate sources about the security of our products, and we want to be exposing it to our engineering teams through that view, so that the security issues, security alerts are being provided to them within the context they work in on a day-to-day basis, basically. So it might be within pull requests, it might be in that security tab, but it's basically bringing the security information they need to them in the interface they're already working in, would be kind of the main principle there. So with that in mind, we use GitHub to track ongoing development activity across all of our teams. Like we're watching commit flows, we're watching PRs, we're watching merges. That's how we kind of keep track of product development as it continues. But we're also testing out using GitHub as kind of almost the sink for our program data. So we're generating all this information about our products. We're pushing it into GitHub, using GitHub issues to track it. We're using Serif ingestion as a big piece here, where we're taking the results of other tools and then bringing it into that security view that GitHub provides. To that point, I would say I greatly appreciate the ongoing work that's been done to the security overview that's provided within our GitHub organization, and definitely looking forward to seeing continued development and what else you can give us in the reporting side of things there.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of sort of the art of the possible in that space. And I love your mentality on this, Jamie, because it fits to an analogy that I often go back to in the security industry and sort of how that industry has changed over the last 2 decades, which in the past, I think a lot of security teams and security tools operated like ambulance drivers, finding something that was critical, bringing it to the hospital, dropping it off, and then driving away, right? And in a lot of ways, you've done what I tell a lot of people security teams should be doing, which is you've made security a wing in the hospital. And now you are not only that specialist that, yes, a critical event has occurred and you get pulled in to help with identifying and remediating that issue, but you're sort of responsible for the long-term health of the applications, not just those moments where things are going bad, which is in a lot of ways, I think, the right way to think about it, especially in this new paradigm. So I've got to ask, you mentioned security overview. You're, of course, looking at information inside of GitHub for the security findings that we're producing and other tools are producing for you. What parts of GitHub Advanced Security are you actually using?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say all the parts right now. So
all the things.
Let me run through a few. Secret scanning is probably, I think that's really the first piece of advanced security we started using. So there's 2 ways we interface with that part of the product. We are a partner from a GitHub of the security scanning program. So in that case, we have a particular token format that one of our products, Terraform Cloud, uses, registered with GitHub. And as GitHub identifies commits that contain data matching this token format, you provide us with alerts, and then we receive those alerts and action on them. So as a partner, that's valuable to us, as it allows us to better protect our own customers. we also use secret scanning as a customer. So we have it turned on across our public. It's on for our public repos and for our private repos. In the event that a secret is committed to a private repo, GitHub secret scanning will let us know about that. And then we can go and rotate the secret, kind of do what we need to do to reduce the exposure of, reduce the impact of that exposure. Two recent advancements there that I have appreciated are the support of custom regexes, basically, for alerting for secret detection. That's a great new addition that we're using. The other thing that we haven't got turned on broadly yet, but are very close to doing, is the pre-commit secret scanning. So that's a huge feature that's going to, if you're talking about workflow and kind of trying to inject security and stop bad things from happening, that's a great new feature for us. So looking forward to having that enabled more broadly. Just as a side note on the secret scanning thing, it was interesting to see that the GitHub change, I think probably about 6 months ago now, in the token, your various token formats, where you move to a more uniquely identifiable or more GitHub associated format. We've recently done the same thing with our Vault 1.10 release, where we have done that, kind of adjust the prefixes slightly to make it so that a regex looking for that format is going to be more likely to be a true positive. Going back to my point earlier. So yeah, secret scanning is a thing we use.
Giving it provenance, right? Like you know where this is coming from, and if you're a security practitioner looking at the alert, you have at least a high-level instinct as to what this belongs to.
Yeah, absolutely. Next thing we're using is code scanning. So yeah, this was code scanning is such an interesting space to me. I alluded to earlier, like living through that, just hundreds and thousands of findings being generated by static analysis that end up being, for the most part, false positives. I never want to live that again. So code scanning, like one of the early discussions we had with the team was around false positives and volume and the principle they have of trying very hard to ensure that code scanning only provides like real value is a strong principle that we appreciate and like. Code scanning is interesting. Static analysis is an interesting one. We have it turned on for a large number of our repositories. We review the results and remediate them. If I talk about my program, GitHub code scanning is one piece of the static analysis we do. We have a second piece, which is our own custom in-house framework that is Golang specific, which definitely gives us a little more ability to very quickly look for flaws across all of our code bases. And then we are also using other tools. Like there's open source products out there that are like Semel, for example, which are relatively low barrier to entry and also have their purpose. So yeah, code scanning is part of the tool set we use. Dependabot is another one. Dependency graph and Dependabot, also advanced security features, I think, that we are using and appreciate. The thing I think that you've been talking about, kind of more a future state here, is the idea that Dependabot is not just going to tell us when vulnerable dependencies are being included in a repository, but getting Dependabot to the point where it can tell us this vulnerable dependency is being used and the code path in question is actually being called from the thing that imports it. Now that is the gold at the end of the rainbow that I'm looking forward to seeing GitHub take us to. It's the questions around the churn that gets caused around, okay, you have this open source project, it's pulling in a dependency on another project, it uses maybe like 2% of the actual code base there. So you end up with these CVE lists or scan results that you aren't exposed to, but for the purpose of hygiene and just reducing scanner noise, currently we do have some churn around that. So we are looking forward to having some tooling that is smarter in that aspect.
Yeah, you're talking about we just announced, I think, on the 14th of April, dependabot vulnerability exposure.
Mm,
So yeah, that's for Python, I think, today. I believe we're going to go after JavaScript next, and then of course probably Java and others at that point. Um, but yeah, it is, to your point. Like I suspect, by the way, I haven't confirmed this internally, so rumor mill here, but from what I saw in the marketing around this and some of the tooling and the way that it works, I suspect it's using some of the code scanning features under the hood to help identify that, maybe. But I'd have to go back and confirm, because to your point, code scanning is one of those interesting technologies. And by the way, the biggest reason why you're seeing differences in false positive rates from other tools versus with code scanning is the treatment of remote sources versus local sources. I won't go into it. I've got a blog post on it out there. It's just securing.dev. People can go read that, because that is sort of the fundamental difference between what is actually vulnerable versus what is vulnerable, but the threat model is sort of ridiculous to say, yeah, that properties file could cause a SQL injection. Well, hopefully privileged users are controlling the properties file, because if they're not, you've got a different problem.
mm,
So anyway, that's it's neat to hear that you're sort of using the whole suite of it, and that you're really looking at how GitHub as that centralizing model can be where you want the developers to see their security findings. Because to your point,
mm.
for so many years, they've had to go elsewhere or get reports in a PDF format that are just, or Jira tickets. Like, heaven forbid we give people more Jira tickets in this day
Mm.
and age. But so when it comes to secret scanning, I know that you've mentioned Vault. We've talked a little bit about it. Um, Tell me a little bit more about some of the challenges that your customers are addressing in that space in terms of like how they're using it, because I have some inclinations as to why they should be using it and what they should be using it for, but I'm curious if you can give any more detail around what's sort of like the standard use case that you see people using it for, and what are some of maybe the neat things that it can do that HashiCorp is doing with it, but others like haven't really realized it can do for them yet.
Mm. So if you talk about a traditional kind of IT environment, we have this concept of secret sprawl, right? Where just secrets are everywhere. They're pervasive across like all the code bases, all the systems. You have hard-coded secrets, long-lived secrets, just distributed broadly across the environment, because that's the way things have evolved essentially. As I mentioned before, what Vault provides you with is a kind of a system that supports a common workflow for management of secrets. It allows you to centralize your secrets. It adds kind of auditability. It adds that concept of ephemeral or short-lived secrets. And it has that kind of common set of UI, CLI, HTTP API access that you can have to get to those secrets. So what our customers are using is they're essentially taming secret sprawl is what Vault helps them do. You stand up a Vault instance, and then you just slowly over time start migrating secrets for all your various systems into Vault. And then you have this common workflow that people can use to access it. You have a common point of access control to the secrets. You have a common point where you can rotate and manage those secrets. So it's really, in many ways, it just helps you, gives you a common workflow and helps instill discipline around how you actually manage these things, because they are essentially the keys to your kingdom, right? You leak kind of any one of these things, it can have a wide-ranging impact to your business overall. So that's what Vault is intended to do, I think. When we talk about secrets, like, it's not just passwords and tokens. There's certificates, there's encryption keys, there's various other pieces of sensitive data that you can push into Vault and use it for storage. So yeah, that's kind of what that solution does. I guess we have encryption as a service as part of that. So one of the common kind of phrases is,
Don't roll your own encryption.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, tell me more about that. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Encryption as a service. You basically, Vault will handle the key management and the actual encryption for you. So you push sensitive data towards Vault. It will provide you back, or it will encrypt and provide you back with the not so sensitive blob that you can store wherever you need to. Like, that's one fairly common use case for it there. It also recently added tokenization as well, so we can convert a sensitive string to a tokenized version of that string. It's an approach that can be used for credit cards and email addresses and various other data like that. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of a Swiss Army knife, I guess, in terms of here's a common workflow to help you kind of standardize how you deal with secrets across your enterprise.
And it works well is the most important part from every time I talk to people, and it's like, okay, when you find things with your secret scanning here on the GitHub side, go look at Vault is what I always say is that's the pattern they should be using. Like, just go there. That's always my default, like out of the gate, just go here. Here's your solution, because it's not enough, I think, in some ways from a security practitioner's perspective to simply find the problem. We should also, in as many ways as possible, be providing solutions, which HashiCorp is. So before I get to sort of the fun, more personal questions around just, like things you're doing outside of work and when you're not looking at a screen, let's jump to some of the Q&A questions that we have, and then we'll wrap with that.
Sounds good.
So one of the first things that it's getting upvoted quite a lot, and I love this, is being that DevOps can oftentimes be a journey, and it's a real change in culture for the developers. Is there any sort of here we go. A lot of devs that are doing presentations to internal audiences for the benefit of DevOps, secrets management, etc. The question was, do we have any sort of repository or presentation that folks can use to spread the good word? I would suspect that maybe offhand, I don't have a ton of marketing material on hand that I could say, like, go read this. There is, of course, the blog that we have for GitHub, and I'm sure that HashiCorp probably has something very similar for sort of pointing people in that direction. So I don't know if there's anything that comes to mind, Jamie, that you've seen, or maybe even like conference talks that you've watched or experienced that are out on YouTube that you might want to recommend to people.
Yeah. So the place to start that I would mention is just HashiCorp.com. If you head over there, there's a range of, we have product-specific information. We also have kind of a solutions lens on the different products we offer. So I would say go over to HashiCorp.com, hit that solutions tab at the top, and it'll give you a wide range of the different use cases or workflows that we can solve with our products. So it's a good place to start. We also have a very well-populated set of tutorials and the like. So if you go to learn.hashicorp.com, then you can really start digging into the individual products and then how you can configure them for some very specific use cases. So there's some good information to dig into at different levels there.
That reminds me also, there is lab.github.com, sort of somewhat unknown to most people out in the world, and it does also have some of the training around CodeQL and other tool sets in the security space, as well as, of course, other features to GitHub. So not only is it good for people to be able to go read about these things, but I think to your point, Jamie, when you actually get your hands on your keyboard and play with them and try them, you build an understanding that you wouldn't get from just reading a document or looking at a blog post or watching a video on YouTube. So
yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask the next question here, which is, let's see. Oh, I marked it as answered. Let me go back and pull that back over and share it. Let's see here. Here we go. So given that ransomware is such a big thing these days in security, how do you recommend, or how does HashiCorp make secrets strategy or secrets management available both, say, in the cloud, and is there an on-premise version that helps with some of that from a disaster recovery perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think secrets management, obviously Vault is the product that we provide there. As I mentioned earlier, we have kind of the open source and then the on-prem version. We also have the HCP managed service version of Vault. So if you want a cloud offering that is detached or isolated from your enterprise environment, then HCP Vault could well be the place to think about there. More generally, Vault is a flexible solution. Like you can, it's distributed. It's operates as a cluster essentially. So you can kind of architect your solution so it will be spread across expanding your blast radius essentially. So you can spread it across multiple cloud providers if you want to, or just AZs within one cloud provider. There are various ways you can architect this thing to reduce your exposure to ransomware for sure. There's also things you can do around, maybe not like, well, there is the online versus offline kind of binary. It's either on or it's off, right? But there are things you can do in terms of isolating environments and only allowing connectivity from a small controlled set to a subset. There's a wide amount of flexibility here for tackling that problem in particular.
Nice. And I saw this one just come in, and I did want to make sure we get a chance to ask it. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I share it, which is, when your team starts building security tooling into the pipeline, where are you getting your most value out of all the tooling? I'm curious to get your take on this. I have opinions here. I'm a little bit biased, but especially when it comes to early adoption of security tools, if you could only buy, say, one or two or maybe three, what order are you buying them in?
This is an interesting. So this comes down to another interesting question I have too, which is around just the whole concept of shift left, right? Common catchphrase at the moment. You want to shift security left. I mean, it makes sense in many ways. Internally, whenever I'm talking to people about this, I tell people, we want to shift left. Yes, we do. That's definitely a tenet where we want to put more security into the development pipeline. But we don't want to shift too much left, and we don't want to slow down developer velocity. So whenever I'm looking at our CI pipeline and what security tooling we're putting into that, we're thinking about how long does it take to run a scan, what is the value of the issues that the scan will find, and then how is our ability to respond to those issues in the timeline that a developer would want to. So yes, shift left, but be cautious as you do so. Think about all those things I just mentioned. What we're doing with tooling is we're taking a split approach. So we have some pieces of our tooling that we do push into the CI pipeline, run it per PR or run it as builds are generated. There are various points within the pipeline where things may be more or less addressable. The other thing that we do is we have a separate workflow where we run out of pipeline. So we have these, we call them async or out of band scans, where we'll run a set of scans every night or once a week or once a month, whatever it is. Often we're using GitHub Actions to drive those, aggregating the results and using Serif and various other methods. So yes, I mean, that's a broad beginning to the answer. And then the answer around, do you start with SaaS? Do you start with DAST? Kind of what type of tool do you use? For me personally, my answer there has changed. Like 5 years ago, I used to say I'll start with DAST, and we'll spin up an application. We'll do kind of a combination of automated scans and then maybe some manual testing against it. These days, my answer has changed. Like static analysis has become less noisy, it's become more accurate, and the tooling's become more accessible with things like custom queries and being able to tailor what it is that you're running. So my current answer there is start with SaaS, perhaps start with an open source or a product that you have access to. Have a look at how it plays with the specific code bases that you're operating in. Like different SaaS will just support different code bases, different languages and frameworks. So there's kind of an experimental nature to it there in terms of just try it out locally before you go too far down the path of pushing tools into CI and then realizing at some late stage that it doesn't do what you thought or what you wanted it to do. That's my 2 cents in the matter, I guess.
It's a great way to think about it. So in the last minute, I wish I could have given you more time on this one, but I always love to ask, when you're not thinking about the holy wars of Vim or Emacs or tabs versus spaces, what are you doing when you're not in front of your screen on a Zoom call or hands-on keyboard? What are you doing in your free time when you're away from your computer?
Oh, man. Time away from Zoom is such a luxury these days. We live just outside of Seattle, up in the foothills of the Cascades. So I'm an outdoorsy type, like trail running, hiking, mountain biking, skiing, snowboarding, just generally getting outside either with myself, friends, family, kind of whatever it is. It's time out in the blue skies of the Seattle region. Sometimes few and far between is probably where I like to be. How about you?
Love it. For me, it's sort of the same. If it's not playing video games or flying my drone, it's reading a book is usually where you'll find me, or writing. I've recently taken to that as well. So with that, Jamie, thank you so much for being here. I do want to just make sure to remind our audience here that please give us your feedback. Let us know what you think. There is a QR code. If you're too afraid to scan the QR code, there's some documents in the docs section that you can go and download. I mean, I'll let your threat model be what it is. Some people don't like QRs. Some people don't like docs. Understandable, given some of the questions we had. But we'd love to hear what you think, and we'd love to get your feedback so that we can do more of these. And of course, coming up next at 11 p.m. or excuse me, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern is security at the speed of GitHub. So we've got Derek, Colin, and Nick, who will talk more specifically about the features that we bring to bear here at GitHub and the advanced security tool set. With that, once again, Jamie, thank you so much for being here, and audience as well. Thank you all for joining us today. Really did appreciate it. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and remember to stay classy.